Hello everyone, we've got a couple miracles to cover. It picks up right after the Sermon on the Mount. We're starting in Matthew chapter 8. When he came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said, "be clean." Immediately he was cured of his leprosy. Then Jesus said to him, "See that you don't tell anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and offer the gift Moses commanded, as a testimony to them." Leprosy, of course, was a very bad skin disease that couldn't be cured, and it was custom to shun the lepers away. Here's some interesting facts in Jewish customs. You had to keep 6 feet away from a leper, and if the wind was blowing, then they had to stay 150 feet away. They were on a mountainside, so it was probably windy. And the only thing considered more gross than a leper was a dead body. So I would imagine that it caused a huge scene. But of course Jesus wasn't afraid. And it's important to notice that the man with leprosy worshipped Jesus. The NIV says that he knelt before him, so he didn't just acknowledge Jesus with his words, which he did by calling him Lord, which translates to Yahweh, but his posture also showed that he believed. With a lot of stories like this, it doesn't mention how the person came to know that Jesus was the Messiah, but he still believed. It's interesting that he asked if Jesus is willing. He was probably being humble. He believed that Jesus was the Messiah, so he probably wasn't sure if Jesus would want anything to do with him. This is a good lesson for all of us. Jesus was willing to touch a man that was almost as defiling as a dead body. This means that Jesus is willing to be in the hearts of anyone. It is important for those with low self-esteem and for those who think that Jesus might not touch some people's lives. Don't think like that. He came for all. It makes you wonder what people thought of him. For one, Jesus didn't have to touch him. He could have just commanded the leprosy to go away. This probably demonstrated Jesus' humbleness. He was also humble because he told the man not to tell anyone. This was a very strange thing to say, especially considering that 1,000 people just saw this miracle. But I think that it was just Jesus being humble. Then Jesus tells him to do a ceremony, which was extremely rare, considering that lepers usually weren't healed. Now we move on to another healing. It's also in Luke 7, but we're going to read Matthew 8, verse 5. When Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him asking for help. "Lord," he said, "my servant lies at home paralyzed and in terrible suffering." Jesus said to him, "I will go and heal him." The centurion replied, "Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, 'Go,' and he goes, and that one, 'Come,' and he comes. I say to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he was astonished and said to those following him, "I tell you the truth, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. I say to you that many will come from the east and the west and will take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the subjects of the kingdom will be thrown outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Then Jesus said to the centurion, "Go, it will be done just as you believed it would." And his servant was healed at that very hour. This one is similar to the last one because we don't know how the man came to believe. I would be interested to see how The Chosen handles it. I think it should be coming out soon. Jesus said, "I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith." The disciples must have had faces like, "Are you kidding me?"
You know how much I sacrificed?
But I think something that seems to be true about the disciples is that they became the most devoted followers in history later. When they were first disciples, they weren't the best at what they did. It was only after the resurrection that they became so great that we call them saints. But anyways, I digress. This was also concerning to anyone who was watching because he was a centurion. Remember, Jews had lots of reasons to hate authority, and I'm not sure that anything's changed today. So we can probably relate to that. Why would Jesus help this person? It was actually against Jewish custom that a Jew would even enter a Gentile's house. Perhaps the centurion knew that because he said, "I do not deserve to have you come under my roof." And part of this is about humbleness, because the centurion went on about how unworthy he was and how much he believed Jesus could heal the servant. It wasn't even for him, he was being selfless. But in a more bigger picture, this shows what Jesus came for. He came to show that there is forgiveness. He says something mind-baffling at the time, which I'm not sure if he's even mentioned it before. He says that the Gentiles will go to heaven. We obviously know this now, but back then that was some big news indeed. And of course today we don't really view the world as Jew and Gentile, but it is still very relevant to us. We are sometimes about identity, but we're more about actions. Sometimes someone hurts you and you don't want them to receive grace. There are a lot of bullies in this world, even in adulthood. Trust me, I've met some lately. And I'll be fully honest here, I'm not practicing what I preach because I still don't forgive them. But that's exactly what Jesus is saying we need to do. We need to forgive and understand that people we don't like can receive God's grace. Hopefully you guys can learn faster than I can. Well, let's leave it there. Thanks, guys.